Good morning, dear friends. Happy Sunday morning or afternoon, wherever the heck you are. Welcome to Dungeon Master's Guide here on the D&D channel. I'm Satine Phoenix, I'm your host for today, and we have a super fun lineup. We have very special guests here. We have Ruty Rutenberg and Elisa Teague, and we are going to talk about Eberron. But before I go into the details on that, let's look at what we have. We have a raffle that we're going to do. We're going to raffle off the Dungeon Master's Guide. So, TK, our mod for today, has opened up the raffle. So go ahead and put exclamation mark raffle in there. Let's see, there's some fine print here. We will be drawing the raffle randomly near the end of the show, and then TK will tell me who won. You must be in chat, and you must message TK in order to actually accept the raffle. There are no location limitations, and we will send it to anywhere in the world, not the universe, because that's expensive. There might be some delays in getting it because of holidays. We might send it next week or the week after. I cannot be certain because I'm not in Seattle to send it. That is Pelham, and I don't know when he goes on vacation. But you will get it in the new year by the latest. Later on, after we do our adventure for today, we will gather 3 questions in chat. So if you have a question for the Dungeon Masters, try to keep it on theme about converting games or Eberron, but question in all caps in front of your question so TK can gather that up, and then she'll give that to me at the very, very end. So the theme for today is levels 1 through 4 for monster characters in Eberron. I have notes. That's what I keep looking at. The details of this are players as monsters, timed gameplay, and puzzles. Okay, because our very, very, very special guests are not only Elisa Teague, the puzzle mistress, the queen of puzzles. I don't really know what we've landed on, but both of those things are true. We also have Ruty Rutenberg, who helped write Keith Baker's Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron. Dun 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 dun! Yay!
Yay!
And now you're on the screen.
Woo!
You guys are very patient. Why don't you, I know all about you guys, so why don't you share with the audience who you are and where they can find you?
Sure. I'm Elisa Teague, and I am a primarily board game and puzzle designer, but I also write a lot of adventures for Dungeons and Dragons. And I wrote the GaryCon epic last year, and I'm writing it this year. I can now say that publicly. And I do incorporate a lot of puzzle material into my adventures because I feel like that is like my unique twist on things, and I like to educate people on how to properly do that at their own tables. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @geekypinup. And I don't know, you can find my games in game stores all across the world.
Yeah, you can. Also, you wrote, I don't know the details, but you were involved in the ARG.
Oh, yes.
Last year.
Yeah. I can now say that. At the time, I could not say that, so I always forget to mention it. So for the Stream of Many Eyes last year, not only did Ivan Van Norman and I co-write the storyline for the Stream of Many Eyes itself, but leading up to the Stream of Many Eyes, we had an ARG going on Twitter called #NoStoneUnturned. And Emmett Fury and I ran that, and I wrote all of the puzzles for that ARG, which is an alternate reality game where we had teams of thousands of people solving puzzles. And it was pretty cool, and it all led up into the Stream of Many Eyes. It was awesome.
Yeah, that was really impressive. I had only heard of something like that a couple times before. But yeah, the way you guys managed, and then you actually gave all of our streams clues to put on our streams so that people in the audience could get those clues to help them with the other clues. Yeah, that was a pretty intense puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool because with something like that, with an ARG, we try to immerse the players into the world, but also into our world. So it was kind of combining D&D with real life things that were going on. We were sending people out to game stores to get pieces and hints and clues and stuff, and everybody was working together. You know, they were on Discord in different groups, and they had teams going on. And Team Volo. And yeah, I mean, it was really fun. It was really a cool way to introduce the stream.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really cool. Ruty Rutenberg, who
Team
are
Durnan.
They didn't do as well.
No, well, I didn't know that there. I don't even think there was one. I just thought I'd throw that out there because
I think there actually was one.
Was there?
Yeah.
Really?
If I had known, I would totally help
There
them
were a
cheat.
lot of speculation because nobody knew what the story was going to be, right? So everybody was speculating on what was going on and who the major players were. Like they didn't even know about Volo, and the most active team named themselves Team Volo, and they didn't even know that Volo was the central character, and they just guessed it randomly. So
And most people don't know how many pies Durnan has his fingers in anyway.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So, my name is Ruty Rutenberg. I am, as Satine said, the co-designer of the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, a 5th edition update for the campaign setting of Eberron that I got to write with Keith Baker. I am also an actor, a voice actor, a screenwriter, a video game writer, and the voice of Durnan. Durnan.
Yeah, that was really
Sure.
fun.
So if you have Sirenscape, which is free, so there's kind of no reason for you not to, one of the sound sets that you can download is the Dragon Heist official Dungeons & Dragons sound set, which is actually for the Yawning Portal, and anything you use in there that has Durnan next to it, that's me, including all of the insults.
Oh, that's
You're good at
hilarious.
those.
There's a random insult in there. We went through every class and did 2 insults for each class.
That's so awesome.
So like there's one about, talking about like, hey, if you try and convert people in my bar, I'll throw you out kind of things.
But you don't just voice about it, you be about it.
I'll be about it.
You were also Durnan at the Stream of Many Eyes this year.
I was. Do we have a picture? No, of course not.
Just do the pose. Yeah. And that was also another thing, and one of the reasons why I wanted you both on, because of that experience. Well, also, I just really think you guys are awesome, and I love how different your brains are. So you guys think about things very differently, but you were both intense, like super, super intelligent. And I really admire the way you puzzle your way through modules and such.
I got called intelligent, which always makes my day.
So today we do not have a correspondent video. So we're going to talk a little bit about Eberron,
Okay.
the style of Eberron first, and then we're going to talk about converting from Forgotten Realms to Eberron, because the adventure that we're going to make today is an Eberron adventure. So I thought we should front load it with some lore, some ideas, and such. And Ruty, since you know everything about, you now know more about Eberron than I do. So why don't you begin? What is Eberron?
Eberron is a setting in which, well, the first off thing that I think everybody needs to know is that just if you are going to play in Eberron, you are not necessarily leaving everything behind. You don't have to relearn everything. A lot of the things that are there are still going to be present from regular D&D, Faerun, Forgotten Realms, what have you, over into Eberron. The saying is that if there's a place for it in D&D, there's a place for it in Eberron. Now, what makes Eberron different is the idea that it is a low, wide magic setting. It's still very high fantasy. It's very pulp in the idea of swashbucklers, but you also get the extra element in there of a little bit of technology, convenience technology made by low-level, repeatable magic, like the idea that basically is magic as a science in a way.
Arcana Punk.
That's what we call it, is Arcana Punk. And then it also has that other layer of a noir feel. So the way that I like to kind of give somebody a real quick download to kind of understand what it is, or what kind of game they're going to be playing, is it's essentially every Harrison Ford movie ever, from Indiana Jones to Blade Runner, and even some Star Wars, because we have airships, we have what could essentially be your replicants in a way with the Warforged, and there's also a whole lot of really rich history that creates a different feeling in Eberron, because there's essentially no real racism. There's no classism in a way. It's very much the political machinations that are all surrounding the nationality. So if you're a dwarf, you don't necessarily have to know Dwarvish. You actually have more of an allegiance to your nation. And so you might speak Elvish if you're a dwarf, if you are from Under, which has a high elven population.
Right.
It's just kind of one of those things where there's a lot of other opportunities to explore storylines you wouldn't normally have the opportunity to in Faerun, including monsters who are actually, like what we would team monsters, who are actually accepted in the world. Plus we have dragon marked houses, we have, like I said, the airships. The dragon marked houses are kind of the people who have been able to use the magic through their bloodlines that manifest in basically living tattoos that give them magic that allows them to not monopolize, but kind of monopolize a certain section of the commercial sector.
So let's talk a little bit about the different areas, because most people, if you've heard anything about Eberron, you've heard of Sharn. I kind of want to talk about, well, we should say what that is, but also the different major areas that make Eberron so specific.
So one of the great things about Eberron is that every character has a jumping off point for having a real backstory that is involved and can connect them immediately, because there was a major event called simply the Last War, which was a very long war that could be considered a civil war between a kingdom, but essentially ended up breaking that kingdom into 5 different nations. And each of those nations warred against each other until this, what could essentially be like a magical nuclear catastrophe, like a cataclysm happened that wiped out one entirely. So a nation previously known as Sire or Kyrie, depending on where you're from, is now called the Mournlands. And it is essentially a toxic wasteland that has relics and its own living dungeon for the most part. Magic works differently inside its borders. And you have these areas now that give characters a lot of flexibility to be from anywhere else, but still have one common thread that connects them. So you have the Mournlands, you have the Lizare Principalities, you have up north, you have a kind of Ravenloft area in Karnath, and then you even have a monster nation in Droam.
Cool. So very quickly, let's talk about converting your typical, there's nothing typical about Forgotten Realms, but your typical Forgotten Realms high fantasy to Eberron. Like, what are the things that you think about when you say you have a pre-written module and you want to start converting?
Sure.
I mean, for me, and I'm saying this not as familiar with Eberron as I am with Forgotten Realms, and I'm actually learning a lot from you while we're talking about this.
Yeah.
But for me, this is really interesting because I feel like there are some definite, I guess there are some like equalities in certain areas of Eberron where things could be more typical to convert over.
Yeah.
And then there's some things that I would find more difficult, like anything that takes place, like I know, like deep in like elven type situations and stuff like that.
Sure.
Is a little bit harder for me actually, only because the places in Eberron that I'm more familiar with are places more like Chult or whatever, where you have like dinosaurs and things like that, where there's like more of a conversion, because I know that there are races that like ride dinosaurs in Eberron. Am I not saying this right?
Yeah, you are.
But
they're not in Chult, they're in the Talenta Plains.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Actually...
So like I know that there are definitely ways to convert already written stuff for Forgotten Realms over to Eberron.
Right.
But maybe there are some areas in Eberron that don't really have that, equivalent situation.
So how about this? Since you're very heavily into Forgotten Realms, and I know it because I've written it as well, but Eberron, why don't you start with like the things that you either find really fascinating and I can kind of move it over, or something that is interesting that you're like, I don't have no idea how this would work, and we'll see if I can break it down in a way that works.
Well, why don't we do that as we're making the adventure?
Oh, sure.
So we are going to take a short commercial break, move to our not so live band, the Sirens, and then come back with making an Eberron adventure with players who are monsters. Levels 1 through 4.
May your road always be clear. May the wind be at your back. May your nights never have fear, and your path always on track. May your mind always be calm, and your thoughts be filled with joy. May your love always be strong, and your fears all be destroyed. Oh, fare thee well. Oh, fare thee well.
If the lamps are burning brightly, may your voice be loud and true. But when you vanish in the night, may the shadows welcome you.
Though your mission may be trying, find your strength and carry on. Let the hope of freedom bring you to the place where you belong. Oh, fare thee well. Oh, fare thee believe in intuition, may you find your heart's twin flame. Stick with what you can believe in, 'cause true love cannot be tamed. When you batten down the hatches and the ship is come ashore, then you'll hear the siren song and know you've made it home. Oh, fare thee well. Oh, fare thee well. May your torches all be lit, may your duels all be won, may your rolls always crisp, keep your face to the sun. May you always have a drink, and your strengths always hit true. May our fame stay in sync, and know we will miss you. Oh, fare thee well. Oh, fare thee well. Oh, fare thee well. Oh, fare thee well.
Hello and welcome back to Dungeon Master's Guide. We're here with Elisa and Ruty, and we are going to make very fast. We're going to make An adventure in Eberron, starring your characters that are monsters. That's right. Cool thing about Eberron is that you can play monsters, changelings, shifters, Kalishtar, goblins. What else we got, Rudy?
Well, I would go through any of the races that came out for Volo's Guide. So orcs, you got your goblins, kobolds. There weren't gnolls, but you could, and you could always take a furbolg and reskin it to a gnoll if you needed to.
Oh, that's very cool. And now you know. So, all right.
Tieflings.
Tieflings.
Some tieflings.
Well, tieflings, they are rare, we found out. Or like we like to call them in Eberron, skinitars.
Yes.
Hairless minotaurs. That's not actually how they work.
Right.
But that's a joke. Are you ready to make an adventure?
Let's do it.
Ready as I'll ever be.
Where do you start when you make adventures?
Well, for me, I start at the end. I know that a lot of people work differently, but for me, I always start with what my end goal is, and then I work backwards through different ways to get there. So if this is my end goal, then I'll say, okay, there are 3 to 4 ways of getting there, and I actually make a tree going down of different ways that then come back down to like a trunk of where you start. And so that way, no matter where my characters decide to blow up my adventure and take it a different way, it actually can naturally grow back to the culmination of the story.
Sure.
Cool.
I start with the problem. Whatever the problem is that needs to be solved by that adventure or by that story, whatever we're trying to tell in that's where I start.
That's interesting. So like kind of right in the middle or close to the...
Usually the resolution area, because it's like kind of puzzles, right? You kind of need to know what the answer is going to be in order to,
Well, that's very true.
form your construct. So in this, I like to pose it as a question first, because then later it makes it easier to fill in a log line.
Okay,
Right.
how about we start right now?
Yep.
What's the question? The answer is the end goal. Ready? What's the question?
Why don't you give me a question? I'll give you the end goal.
The question, like the problem in the
Sure.
story. The problem in the story is that our players are trying to find out what is causing the destruction of whatever nearby forest is happening.
Okay. So are you good?
Continue, please.
Okay. So then you've also, in your question, answered what our end goal is.
Right.
We essentially need them to figure it out,
Mhm.
but also, how does that impact the characters or the forest? And what is the next step or next module that we can do? And or is this the end?
This
of
is
what
the
you're
end
doing?
of this. We're just doing one shot.
Right.
So for a one shot, and you've got the problem. What's the location? Location would be.
So if we're doing monster stuff, there are a couple of primary locations. We could use the Elding Reaches. We could use the Lesare Principalities, or Droam is the most, it's the monster nation.
heavy.
Right, so you have that, you have the Shadow Marches a little farther away, and then also the Demon Wastes.
Okay, so where do you guys want to start this?
That sounds like the good place to start then.
Which
Drone,
one?
right?
Droam is probably going to give
Right.
us the most mileage.
All right. Our adventure begins in Drum. The problem is.
The problem is that something is desecrating the forest. Is it like a disease, or is it a magical something, or is it something's chopping things down?
Sure. So let's take that and start off with there are gnolls,
Mhm.
because the gnolls in this area are actually, they're not the demon worshipping gnolls we know from the Forgotten Realms. This is one of the big differences, is that they're actually known as the peacekeepers of Droam. So they're the scouts, they're the eyes in the forest, if you will, for the hags. They're the daughters of Sorakel, which are the 3 hags that basically rule Droam. And they have each little area kind of broken down with a warlord in charge of each that report back up. And the gnolls are the priest keepers between the warlords.
So they can serve as our like quest givers.
The
pretty
gnolls
much,
can, absolutely.
because they have overseen all of this. So they're our base of knowledge here for
Right.
our characters.
So then what's the inciting incident that we would normally have here for that? You were saying that it could be chopped down, like things could
Yeah.
be chopping down.
I mean, yeah, I always go more magical in nature, so I'm thinking
Yeah, let's
like
go
some sort of like
Let's do it.
magical disease, like blackening all the trees. You
Like
know,
a-
something that's like,
Like a rot or a mutation?
yeah, like a
Why don't we stick because of the Mornland?
Yes.
Why don't we go with a mutation?
oh, that's perfect.
So a very easy way to go with that is you can say that some of the monsters that were either mercenaries in the Mournlands during the last war, or sorry, in Sire or whatnot during the last war, are starting to report mutations in the forest or the plains. They're around around probably the southeastern portion of Droam, just southeast of Greywall, are starting to report mutations and dying trees that are out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I think that's great because you can
Yeah.
give really good character hooks depending on what the players are, the characters are. Like if you have somebody that has an attachment to this being their homeland, or if they have an attachment to, nature in general, you can really get a hook of why do they want to help.
Right.
us,
Let's make it
right?
like a creeping crud. Let's make it like something that is like basically growing out of the ground and taking and laying a new layer of what seems to be mutated organic material.
I love that.
Yeah, gross. I like it. Okay, cool. So we have the what. We have. So what is it? What is that end thing?
So if we're going to go, like, I would say that we can probably make that anything from failed experiments by, you could use a necromancer, we could use somebody maybe trying to figure out how to use blood magic again, which was a big thing that actually ended up destroying one of the moons way back when the giants were
Let's do
created.
ancient lore.
Ancient lore.
Yeah.
So essentially, the dragons had to come and destroy all the giants and turn them into simpletons because they started manipulating blood magic. So it could be a form of blood magic that's out there.
Okay.
But the important thing that I think now, go ahead.
No, please continue.
So if that's going to be like there's an ancient text or something, or there's a magic sigil or an item, if you will, an altar, anything, or even the manifest zones, anything like that, we essentially need to be able to shut it down or destroy it.
Right.
So if that's the case, we kind of have what our last encounter needs to be, what our goal needs to be for the thing. But in a good module and a good story, we have to have the ups and downs.
Of course.
So we kind of need to Agatha Christie the thing where we have a MacGuffin in a way.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think that what we can put in there is an assumption that this is happening from a different source, right?
Right.
So, while it could be somebody attempting to resurrect blood magic, but maybe they can get some false information that there's actually maybe a natural reason that this is happening.
So
If they have
manifest
to
zone.
go, they have to go and investigate.
So a false positive here could be a manifest zone. A Mabar, Mabar, manifest zone would end up connecting it to one of the realms that has a lot of necrotic, negative energy and is known for being very nightmarish and madness kind of style.
So the manifest zone is a portal. That,
Kind of, yeah.
Like a gateway to other planes.
Yeah, if you think about it like in terms of Faerun or Ravenloft, which wasn't originally Faerun, but if you think about it in that way, it's kind of like the mist.
Right.
It's not like just like a portal
Yeah.
that's always open, but it's the time when the planets are aligned a little bit better in,
Right.
in the
So there's
their
like you
course.
walk between the worlds, kind of.
Kind of things can cross over
Right.
a little easier, almost like in the way the Upside Down worked. And
Oh yeah.
so
Okay,
like
cool.
you come out on the other side of a tree, or like you walk through a brush, and like all of a sudden everything is nasty.
Right.
Okay, so blood magic. Who is this person? Race.
See, I always go,
Class.
and this is the interesting thing about converting
Mm-hmm.
to Eberron is I'm always going to go to like the evil stereotypical monster.
Oh, we almost always
Whatever.
go human.
But now it has to be.
Yeah, no, I would
Something
go
else with
human.
human.
How about this? Since we have Azamar, and Azamar are also rare, like tieflings, why don't we make it a fallen Azamar?
Cool. Okay.
But the fallen Azamar is the MacGuffin. The
Right.
manifest zone has corrupted that. The blood magic is actually going to be coming from an item, like an altar or something that can be destroyed.
Okay, so who is this person? You have an Azamar. Tell me a little bit about this bad guy.
Well, for me, I always when I'm developing, our bad guy character, like what is their motivation?
Sure.
Is it an honest mistake?
Mhm.
Is it just propagated by their own desires of what they want, and they don't realize what they're doing to the world around them?
Sure.
Or are they just truly evil, right?
So in Eberron, we don't really do truly
Evil.
evil.
Yeah.
Everybody has motives. everybody believes they're the hero of their own story.
It's perspective.
Everything's
Evil
perspective.
is perspective.
Right.
Yes. There's no real alignment in Eberron.
Yeah.
So everything they can have sins, they can totally be not so good people, but we try and make it to where they're layered. And usually bad guys have layers of protection above them, like plausible deniability and stuff. But in this scenario, it's a one shot. We're not really looking to go the mystery route. So this is very much going to be a guy or a girl. Let's come up with we'll just say Lewison. It's a good neutral name.
Sure.
And Lewison is an Azamar who has been corrupted by the nearby item or relic, but doesn't know that it's actually there.
Oh. So our characters in destroying the item are not only going to fix the problem, but they are also going to save Lewison.
Yes, if they don't kill
Our unknowing
them
villain.
in the
Okay,
meantime.
cool. So really, the bad guy is the artifact.
Yeah, the bad guy is
Yeah,
the
in a sense,
it's the misunderstanding of magic. It's the ignorance of how that magic is supposed to work.
Ooh, okay.
Because in Eberron, that's the other thing, is we tackle themes that are different than Faerun. Faerun's very black and white in a lot of ways.
Right.
Eberron is almost all gray.
So what is our by poisoning this forest? What does our bad guy want?
Well, if he's being whispered to by the item, right? Maybe is it power, or is it a false desire, or to fix something else that's wrong?
So because it's a
Right.
MacGuffin kind of character, we can actually even go the full pawn route in the sense of this blood magic could be corrupting the vision, like the actual way that the world is perceived. So
I mean, that's pretty.
this actually makes it seem to them like what they're doing to the forest is actually saving it. Like they could essentially think they're a druid trying to save.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, do
Okay.
they have this false perception that
Sure.
they're actually trying to save something, or
Yeah.
they're trying to fix something else that's wrong in the forest?
Yes.
Um,
However, if they're unaware that they're being corrupted, then the players now have the extra burden of they can't question Lewison. They can't torture or get the information out in that way. So now we have to actually provide that way that can happen.
Okay,
Right.
cool. So we have a reason. We have an item. This artifact is an altar. Did we say? What is?
Just call it a relic.
Well,
It could be like a book, even, or something.
Yeah,
But
let's
I'm
pick
thinking
it.
about
We're
something
picking
So
it right
then,
now.
so then let's call it a corrupted dragon shard.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Let's call it a kyber shard.
Okay.
Or let's even make something up for this, and we'll call it a Zoriat shard. XOR.
Why?
Why? Because Zoria is the realm of madness it's the moon that actually got destroyed. So by the blood magic that the giants had to use
Yeah.
to stop an invasion, essentially.
Cool.
I
That
need like
makes
a
sense.
walking dictionary in my back pocket whenever I'm writing adventures. It's perfect.
Cool. So, all right, let's actually make the adventure path.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Where would you like to start?
So again, I usually start at the top and go back,
Sure.
but
I think are you
And we
talking
have 10
chronologically?
minutes.
You're talking chronologically?
You tell me where to start. If you want to start back, we can start at the end and move forward.
Okay.
We can start with the big battle at the end and then move forward, like wherever you guys want. We got to do it in 10 minutes.
So let's
Okay.
knock out the easy stuff
Sure.
first. The easy stuff is going to be where do we get this quest? Grey Wall is a very easy place to start. It's the major capital city for Droam. It's also not so far away from where the sisters are that their agents can be there. They can give you information, etc. So if we take that, you can do your standard start in a tavern, or you can do right, and that's always
I mean, look, I mean, it is a standard for a reason, but for me, I think I would rather it be they're walking through the city and there are vendors and nobody has anything that would normally be harvested from the forest because it's all
that
corrupted.
works.
And like, why is there no food? Why is there no whatever? Because it's all corrupted. Right?
So I was going to go with a ritual because they're hags, so essentially they're witches, and I was going to go with like they're attending essentially the religious holiday of it, and let's use the vendors there for the religious holiday.
Okay, sounds good.
Whatever happens, there's no supplies. Need help.
Yep. And in this, the characters are able to ask questions and learn that the vendors don't have these usual supplies that would come from X place. And through your first act, you're basically having the Q&A, learning what that is. And then the second part, because we mostly write four acts for that. So your second act there is the exploration and the travel to get there.
Right. I mean, we could even have in that first act, like when they're discovering this, we can have a Knoll interacting with a vendor where they can overhear a conversation of, oh, we've witnessed this happening. Now there are no supplies.
Right.
Let me go back to my circle and see what's going on, and then maybe they would follow.
Right. You could very easily even just have a guard conversation that they overhear through a variety of checks. Part 2 is going to be mostly getting to the forest, doing exploration, and getting the major clues about the MacGuffin. And maybe this is as blunt as they see Lewison out there doing things to the forest. And then through maybe an initial combat or a social interaction, we kind of want this to have a social interaction, but we can also leave like a diary if they tend to be a little more murder hobo-y.
Yeah.
And then that way we can see what Lewison was up to, and we can leave the information of where it all seems to be emanating from.
You definitely have to leave some sort of clue, like a diary or whatever.
Absolutely.
Just in case Lewison meets the pointy end of a sword.
Right.
But
what would you do if not that? Because I do believe we used a diary in last week's episode.
Did we?
Oh, okay. Well, if not that, then any conversation that he may have had with any people that may have been around. So hearsay.
It's not just him, right? Maybe he's got other people around that are following him and
like an apprentice or something
influencing his the ideas that he or like.
We could go full Lucifer and have him actually have taken a contingency of angels that have also gotten corrupted.
Cultist angels.
You could have like an entire group of that. The other thing we could do is there could be a sending stone that is actually like a chunk of the destroyed moon that is whispering these things and just whispers something on repeat.
Oh, that is interesting.
Cool.
And these things may not even ever come into play.
Right.
And depending on how long of an adventure you're running and like how you want to time things, you can either stick them in there anyway or not. You know,
Right.
Okay. So this might be following the crud to a druid circle.
Sure.
Where they actually gather and do a lot of things. That's
Yeah.
not necessarily
Like a Stonehenge.
Yeah.
And then this would also be a thing too, where another clue we can give is that the crud gets thicker or more like when you walk on it, it's more springy, just different things. I like to give a myriad of clues to be able to kind of alter the difficulty of a module in the same way that CR is, like CR would do for animal or creatures.
Cool.
So after we have that, and you essentially have your midpoint being the information that you gain from Lewison, you are now alerted to the fact that Lewison is not the core cause. Might be a symptom, but is not the cause. And then you have the exploration phase where you make your way there. Let's assume that this goes underground, just because this makes it easy. There's mountains in the area, very much so. And that gets us down to the roots. So we actually will get to the root of the problem. And when you're writing modules, it's very important to have catchy, like 2 to 3 word headings for each one.
Yeah.
You can read a module very quickly and be like, oh, look, everybody's clever. So when you go down and you do that, then we have our little movement through there. You have exploration. You can hand out more clues that kind of unravel the things that have been happening and give lore background for the world. Since this is a 1 to 4 adventure, that is also part of our job, is to be able to give people information about the world. So you can have a little room where maybe you drop some of the other stuff.
Right. I mean, if this is like an underground layer of sorts, then there's a lot of discovery that can be done in there. And for groups that like things like treasure and whatnot, it is a perfect place to drop certain, bonuses and boons for things like that. But then they can go through an exploration. This is where I would stick a puzzle in this. And they can find out a little bit more about Lewison and what his history is. So whether he is babbling on like a crazy person with a sense of, you know, a sense of purpose that is false, or whether or not he's been killed by our group already, or whatever, they can still find out more about him in either case.
Right.
By going through his things.
Okay, so what is the puzzle? What is not details, but like what kind of puzzle would you put in?
So I mean, in this format of quick writing, it's hard to explain the puzzle writing process, but I always would take whatever my surrounding elements are in an environment and build it into the puzzle. So if I'm in his underground lair office or whatever, anything like books are a great source, or again, I know you don't want to go back to a diary, but if he's writing ramblings, I would put in a secret code in the ramblings that had to be deciphered. So things that make absolutely no sense then make sense through the solving of a puzzle.
You could have like writings all over the cave wall.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Anything like that. So that's where I would put it in. Of course, that process of writing a puzzle, it takes a lot longer than the time we have.
We would.
Now, what I would do in that scenario for a different type of puzzle is I would probably go more actual organic environment and create an obstacle course of sorts that has to be reasoned through. To give you
find our item, you mean, or
to get to the next area.
Right.
Like, since we're in a tunnel, it's not really a railroad when it's a tunnel.
Right.
So they have to go through it to get there. So that's a good place for you to be able to put roadblocks.
So why don't we put the underground layer? You have to go through an obstacle course in order to get to the actual layer part, and that's when the puzzle gets that's where you put the puzzle. That way we can have both the things.
Exactly.
You don't have to not have.
I mean, if this shard is so valuable and important to Lewison, he's going to have it hidden somewhere, right?
Maybe.
And so
if he knows about it.
Yeah. So this puzzle, if he knows about it.
Right.
But I feel like he should know about it, but be protecting it and his.
All right.
Craziness.
So we have only a couple minutes left.
So then where I would go from there is we have to get our fourth part. So we need to get that final big encounter, regardless of whether it's combat or otherwise. And I think that where we go with that is we introduce symbionts because they are something that is very unique to Eberron and very specific to the Zoriat. And you can have those.
I remember now.
Right. Maybe the relic is actually a capsule that has been containing symbiotes, and there's a little hole in it or something like that, and they leak out, and that's what's on Lewison and his or her buddies, their compatriots, etc.
That's cool.
Okay,
Yeah.
so because
And
we
corrupting
literally
the
have like 1 minute left, let's walk through the final battle. And
Sure.
walk through that, the symbiote, and this final battle.
Okay.
So walk me through it.
So what I would think here is a good way to handle this is to have it be a two-phase battle. One is where you're fighting creatures that have been corrupted by the symbiotes. They don't necessarily need to be people or intelligent. And then you have a hyper kind of like the next evolution of that, where the symbionts are actually transforming, and you're essentially fighting off like the animal versions of Venom or Carnage,
Right.
in order to destroy the shard, which is probably like the gateway, one of the only gateways
Right.
left.
And at this point, our characters probably know that the source is the shard.
Yes.
So they can also, if they can get to it, they can end combat by destroying the shard if they know how.
Right.
Which actually could be the answer to the puzzle.
Should
is
be.
how to destroy the shard.
Right. And so
Right.
you can use the environment for that as well.
Correct.
You could have a hole that
So-
leads to a pit of
So
fire.
maybe this is a temple, like an underground forgotten temple
Yeah.
made by the ancients.
The giants where a lot of this stuff took place was in Zendrick. So this would be like a fallen shard off to the side, likely, if you were going to be like super lore specific, but it could be anything you wanted.
So, but
Anyway.
is there something in the history of that part of the world that has something?
Well, so elves actually left because the elves were created by the giants and then enslaved by the giants. And some of them went off and created their own continent, but others moved to Corvair at a certain time frame. So it could be something that they brought with them over there, and there could have been one group that like hoarded some of this and then actually made it actually started their own cult. The cult was abolished, but they didn't get rid of that thing. And the proximity of the moons now the orbit and everything like that is what's
But
reawakening.
it's it could have been
Okay.
dormant this whole entire time.
That's awesome. That was super fast. Congratulations. You made an adventure in 20 minutes. So, what is the name of this?
I mean, we could call it the root of evil if we wanted to,
Oh,
or a shard in the dark,
Ooh,
or
I love your punny titles.
yeah, right, like a host too many.
I like a shard in the dark.
Shard
in the dark.
Okay.
Or does that give it away?
Yeah, it kind of does. It's
That
a
gives
little
it
on
away.
the nose.
Well, we can fix it in post. Thank you guys for participating in this today. Oh, excuse me. I got
Terrible
so-
hosts.
Huh?
Terrible hosts.
I don't like that name. This is a good one. Root of all evil.
Root of all evil.
Shard in the dark. We'll fix it in post. We can, if you guys want, send us in chat what you think. Okay, so we are going to wrap this up. We only have 10 minutes left of the show. It goes by really fast.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, wow. Okay, let's see. I've got notes here. Thank you guys so much. We are going to take questions. TK, can you please gather those lovely questions for us? While we're waiting on the questions from our audience, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about your house rules that make your game so specifically you?
Well, my house rules, I don't want to say that I'm like super rules lawyery, but I pretty much am. So when I think about what my house rules are, it really has to do with puzzles in general. So again, I put puzzles into pretty much everything I do. The groups that I play with really appreciate puzzles. And so for me, I adjust rules and skill checks in order for puzzles to work better and have a better workflow with the characters themselves. And man, it's a really long explanation of how I do it, but basically it allows our players to participate in puzzles no matter who their characters are. So whether the player has personal puzzle knowledge or the ability to solve puzzles, and whether their characters do, my rules balance things out through skill checks.
Cool.
And so that's really where my house rules come into play, is I will allow them to roll for things that normally would not apply to a situation in order to solve a puzzle. So if you're playing a character that isn't exactly smart, there are things that they can do to help solve the puzzle in a different way. And if you're, especially if you're smart and you know how to solve a puzzle, and if you're not a puzzle person, but your character is especially smart, they can then roll skill checks to get clues, which would be their innate ability to solve the puzzle through their character.
That's awesome. Cool, thank you. Ruty, house rule, please.
I almost want to ask you what my house rules are, since you're a player in my game, but in order to not put you on the spot and to try and remember what they are on my end as well, I think that my biggest one, the biggest ones that I use are the be considerate of the people that are having the scenes, because I like the RP heavy stuff. That's what I want to play, because we can do the numbers all day long, right? But we might as well play a simulation of a game. I like to see what people are going to do, so try and try and do those things, but ask permission with your eyes. We do this thing before Inkwell that you guys probably don't see, but every now and then we go eye contact, eye contact, eye contact, eye contact. And what we're essentially saying is, make sure that before you enter a scene, or before you blurt out in crosstalk or shut somebody down, that you're asking with your eyes for an invitation to the party. And that goes a really long way, because my main quote for gaming in general, for the way that I like to run games, is that a world with no consequence is of no consequence. So if you blurt into a scene that you weren't welcome into in the first place, or if you talk out of turn or out of character in a certain scenario, I'm pretty much going to use that as part of the game thing, because you were not observing the rules that everybody else had agreed to, and that you had agreed to. So if you don't do that, like, there should be some sort of...
Right. No, I like that a lot, actually, because it allows people to adhere to the social contract that they make when they sit down at a table.
we're both of us, I think, are very big about doing a session 0 every game. Right before we start, we take 5 minutes, we do that. And I'm a huge fan of my other major rule, I think, is, which isn't really a rule, but my major thing is like, what is your sin? Not a flaw, not something that happened to you, but what is the selfish thing that you did, and how does that color your interaction?
Yeah, and that's really good for a noir game, especially. But I
think
don't
it's
know,
good for
playing with flaws
characters.
is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 questions from the audience.
Shoot.
First question by Levimote. Question is suggestions on helping players work the last war into their character's backstory.
To work what?
Yeah, repeat the question real quick.
Suggestions on helping players work the last war into the character's backstory.
Oh, okay. So to me, that's super simple, because think about it in the same way, and I don't know where you're from, but think about it in the same way of World War II. Essentially, where Eberron lets us sit is kind of in that sweet spot between the romanticism and the danger of World War I and World War II. We're essentially in a Cold War era. So everyone that you know either participated in the war or was affected by it. And if they weren't, there should be a very specific reason and why. So you can take a nation standpoint and say, oh, well, I'm from this nation was involved in this stuff, so I either worked as support for that, I helped create some of the materials for that, or I actually fought on the front lines. And if you didn't, why? What were you doing? What was the part of that? That's the easiest way to work things into the last war.
Okay, question number 2.
Oh, sorry, and what was the terrible thing you did during the war?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Question number 2 from Dwarf Punter.
Dwarf Hunter!
In Inkwell, what made you want to start the characters at level 0 versus level 1?
That's a you question.
Yeah, right?
And this is we have an Eberron show on Wednesdays that Ruty is a dungeon master for.
So for Inkwell specifically, what we wanted to do was be able to make sure that everybody didn't come into that thinking they were already superheroes.
Right.
Because that tends to be something that creates the murder hobo mantra that people get into. And also, it, to me, makes it harder for you to sit in the RP moments and to relate to each other because you're so busy being worried about the power that you have. So for 0, the important thing was to essentially say, we're going to be playing your session 0 for a while so that you can actually get to know your character, so that your characters can get to know each other, and so that we can establish the group dynamic by personality and background rather than by, oh, I'm a ranger with 0 experience being a ranger.
Yeah, I actually really like that because what a lot of people can't really grasp is that once you become like even level 1 but even by like level 4, you are so beyond any action hero, any fictional character you can dream of in any movie you've ever seen. Like, you are so beyond that. And then when you think about how low level 4 is in general in the whole scheme of things, like, people don't realize how powerful they really are. So giving them that chance to actually develop as a person, as a character, and give a history is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
especially in Eberron.
Go ahead. No, you're going to say what I was going to say.
Especially in Eberron, usually you're lucky if you get to 5th level.
Yeah.
Because it's a very low level. So
And
we
because
I'm sorry, we have to
that's
continue.
fine.
We have 4 minutes left
Go.
in the show.
Go.
Last
I'll circle back
question.
if I can.
We're just moving
Go.
on. Calamity Jane asks, to lighten the creative load on one person, and I want one really brief answer. To lighten the creative load on one person, what do you think of a rotating DM style of play? Sort of taking from the West Marches format, but adding it rotating DMs who lead the group through one shorter adventure. So the same cast of characters traveling around together, taking on shorter adventures.
I like it if you can work together and not try to take over the story from the last person and railroad the rest of your group. Because you have to understand, if you're doing a rotating DM system, that you have to hand off the baton to the next person in a place where they can then take it and not protect it like it's your baby.
Yeah.
And if they take it in a different direction, they're taking it in a different direction. And you have to understand that from the get-go. Again, another part of the social contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can get complicated, very much so. And for me, I tend to think that every player is just as much part of the story or storytelling aspect as the DM is. I only consider myself to be, right now on Inkwell, 1/5 of the creative power. And if you're enabling the players, they are telling the story. They are being DMs in the thing. All I'm doing is representing a consistent voice for the world.
Right.
So the NPCs will all sound the same. You'll know them. I'll know the quirks for them. And that's not something that you have to all of a sudden remember, and or that I have to remember that you added a quirk.
Yeah, I think it actually probably doesn't lighten the load.
I would say it probably
It's
makes it
difficult,
harder.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you guys for being on our show, the Dungeon Master's Guide. And I want to congratulate the raffle winner, Silverlock. Congratulations, you have a Dungeon Master's Guide. I have your information right here. Thank you, TK, so much. It is awesome having someone on the inside to gather all the information.
Join the fray.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you to Dungeons and Dragons and our sponsors. I want to do a huge congratulations to Idle Champions. Idle Champions, you can now play on Xbox and PlayStation, iPad, Android, and Steam. I'm excited selfishly because you can play me on that, and I'm a PlayStation girl. So this week from 12 to 1 p.m., Monday through Friday, we have interviews on twitch.tv/D&D. Monday, we have Ryan Hartman talking about Donar Blitzen. Tuesday, Scott Kurtz talking about Binwin Bronzebottom. Wednesday, Violet Miller talking about Ishi Snaggletooth. Thursday, I'll be talking about Blanya. And Friday, Jim Zub will talk about Neris Cthulhu. Thank you to our Maze Arcana production team. Today in the studio, we have Andre Barrett, Steven Sprinkles, and Melanie Sprinkles. Again, thank you, TK. Thank you to the audience. Don't forget to tune in to our other Maze Arcana shows and other twitch.tv/D&D shows. Tuesday, we have Sirens. Wednesday, we have Inkwell Society. And if you don't know what to watch on Christmas, we're doing a Sirens of the Realms Season 3 marathon starting at 1 a.m. That is 11 episodes starting at 1 a.m. and just going to keep going. So thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned. Right about an hour from now, we will have Girls Guts Glory with Dungeon Master Kelly D'Angelo. Thank you guys and see you soon.